Pittsburgh Steelers, and you can't beat Scott Tolzien. Scott Tolzien. I don't even want to talk about you no more. I mean, if they lose to this dude, we might have to talk about them tomorrow because we're going to revisit the results of today's games. But that's about it. I don't even want to talk about the Steelers anymore. Now, you can't beat Scott Tolzien? Him? You've got to be kidding me. I don't want to hear it.
Really hitting that zine hard, Stephen A. Ask and you shall receive. The Steelers dominated at Indy with a 28-7 win. Business. It was booming for Antonio Brown with 3 TDs. This Colts team was decimated by injuries, most notably, of course, Andrew Luck. Mr. Smith, your Steelers, how much stock are you putting into that win?
Nothing. Didn't mean anything to me. I fully expected them to win. My stock would have been had they lost. Had they lost, it would have dropped. It would have plummeted into an abyss, never to return for the rest of this season. You can't beat the Indianapolis Colts with Scott Tolzien starting as your quarterback instead of Andrew Luck. I would not have wanted to hear it. But then take into consideration, not only did that happen, but safety Clayton Gaithers, he didn't sit there. He didn't play because he was injured before the game. Ryan Kelly, your center, got hurt during the game. You know, what is it? Vontae Davis, he hurt his groin injury. He couldn't play. Denzel Good, shoulder and neck. He couldn't play. T.Y. Hilton, we all know what a bad boy he is. He ultimately ended up getting hurt his back. Robert Mathis hurt his elbow. So everywhere you turned, they were decimated by injuries if you were the Indianapolis Colts. When you combine that with Big Ben Roethlisberger, being able to hook up with Antonio Brown, who, by the way, is one of the top 2 to 3 receivers in the game, somebody that we debated was the best receiver in the game of football at the start of this season, and you have him in single coverage, you better have scored 3 touchdowns against the Colts. So I'm not putting much stock in it other than to say this. The Pittsburgh Steelers did what the hell they were supposed to do. So there is no abyss to fall in, never to be returned or never to be seen again for the rest of this season. That much I will give them. But I'm not putting much stock in it. It's just that now they don't fall into the abyss. I'm not overwhelmed. They were supposed to do this. This is what's called handling your business.
Even had they lost, whatever, short week, you lose to a team you should beat. It happens to most teams throughout the course of the season. Doesn't mean they would have lost the division. The Ravens are sitting there 5-5. I just spoke about their point differential. They're not that good. I never thought the Steelers were going to be that great this season as many others did. But without Martavis Bryant, you still figure you got a really good offensive line. You got a great future Hall of Fame quarterback who's playing at a very high level still. You have arguably the best receiver in the game. And I think you have certainly the best running back in the game, though it doesn't look like it this season. So what did we see here yesterday? And by the way, Tolzien was game. Tolzien was he was a good competitor yesterday, just didn't have enough to work with, and he was against a better team. So I agree that the Steelers' defense looked a little maybe better than they really are yesterday. If you're thinking that's what they are defensively, those picks late in the game, that's not really them. That's a desperate, quarterback who hadn't played in a long time just trying to make something happen because his team is losing and they were picking him off. Big deal. But the offensive line played very well. Ben Roethlisberger threw 3 touchdown passes
they always do
to Antonio. Ben Roethlisberger threw 3 touchdown passes to Antonio Brown. And Le'Veon Bell not only ran for 120 yards, but 80-plus were before contact. I mean, the offensive line was playing really well. My point, but there were times this season, Stephen A., where I looked at that offensive line, I thought, not what I thought it was going to be. They're back. So now my point is the Steelers are who I thought they'd be to begin the season. A team kind of like the Oakland Raiders or the Atlanta Falcons or the New Orleans Saints in the sense that they have a really good offensive line, some elite skills position players, and a high-powered offense. And the question is, how well can they play defense? I believe not enough to be a serious Super Bowl threat, but certainly well enough to win the division. I think if you're a Steelers fan, you got to look at yesterday and say, yup, that's the team I thought they'd be. High-powered offensive team with a chance to win any given Sunday, or in this case, Thanksgiving Day. I think that's what you got to take away from it.
The operative words that you threw out there is looking at them yesterday, because the whole premise of it all was this. Had you went up against this particular Indianapolis Colts team, led by Ryan Grigson, coached by Chuck Pagano, without the services of Andrew Luck, against that defense that was going to put Antonio Brown in single coverage because they were so decimated by injuries. If you were the Steelers and you had went out on that field Sunday night in Indianapolis and stunk up the joint or managed to lose to that team, you would have gotten that. To me, there's no way that anybody would have been able to make the argument that you just made. Certainly your argument is salient and profound at this particular juncture because they handled their business yesterday. But had they not handled their business yesterday, which was my point, it would have been a disaster. And I'm telling you right now, I would have been finished with them had they lost last night's game to this Indianapolis Colts team.
Nobody, like, let's say the playoffs were to start today and the Steelers were in them. No, if your draw was the Steelers, if you have to play that team, even if you're a fundamentally better team because you're balanced on both sides of the ball, you're still like, maybe we could have gotten some other kind, some other team, not those guys.
Not against
because
that
they
defense.
are so special on offense on the line.
Defense.
No, not the defense, but the quarterback, the wideout, and the running back are basically as good as it ever gets. You rarely have that three combination behind a good offensive line as the Steelers do right now.
Business booming, business handled. Steelers are in first in the AFC North, and you know what's going to be fun next week, a week from Sunday? We have Max's Giants versus Stephen A's Steelers. I think we need a little wager, gentlemen, coming up on the line. Speaking of knowing what it's like to be in first, Dak Prescott is doing things that have never been done in a Cowboys uniform. But will he be able to take his team to the Super Bowl? We discuss. So let's listen to this. Every single game this season, the Lions have trailed in the fourth quarter, and the games have been decided by 7 points or fewer. Now, to put this in perspective, since 2008, 8 teams have trailed in the fourth in each of their first 11 games in a season. Detroit, they're 7-4, while the other 7 teams were a combined 4-73 through 11 games.
Charmed life would be up by 30 in the fourth quarter. We're just battling. I think that's more than anything. We don't feel lucky to be down in every fourth quarter. We feel like we're working our tails off to get wins, and have still yet to put together, a 3-phase, 60-minute game where we all play really well. But as we're learning about our team and building and getting better, we're finding ways to win games, and that's important.
I like what Stafford had to say there. Yesterday was no different as they beat the Vikings for the second time this season and claimed the top spot in the NFC North. Stephen A., are the Lions lucky or are they good?
I think they're good. I got to give credit where credit is due. I mean, anytime you go out there and you show the level of resiliency that they have put on display, you got to give a lot of credit. I got to give credit to Jim Caldwell. I didn't think he was long for this job, particularly the way they struggled last year. But when you look at the way that they've won this year, they've now beaten Minnesota twice. They're 7-4. They're on a roll right now, and they've got holes everywhere. Their running game isn't that great, even though yesterday they averaged more than 4.5 yards per carry. And really, with theoretic, there were no yardages for loss, so that's really impressive. The wide receivers showed up after having an off week, particularly Anquan Bolden in third down situations. Plus, he registered their only touchdown, and Golden Tate has been balling as well. Ebron was without a catch, though. They still won. Their offensive line wasn't doing a good job of protecting Matthew Stafford pretty much throughout the game. They still won. Their defensive line wasn't able to get any kind of pressure whatsoever on Sam Bradford for most of the game, yet they still won. And as you pointed out, they've trailed in the fourth quarter of every single game this year, yet they've managed to come back and win 7 of those 11 games. So it's about time to give them respect and love where it's due, because anytime you show that level of resiliency and you respond to that level of adversity, that is a huge plus. But in particular, when it comes to a guy like Matthew Stafford, we knew he had the talent. We knew he could make the requisite throws. We knew he could run with the football as well, which he showed us yesterday. But what we didn't know is that he would be and could be this type of leader. He clearly is. He deserves a lot of credit. I'm going to lean towards good a hell of a lot more than I'm going to lean towards luck.
But the answer is luck. And Matthew Stafford is in the MVP conversation. He wouldn't get my vote right now if I had one, but he is one of the names that should come up. He's having a fantastic year. Look, take it from a New York Football Giants fan. I know it when a team gets a little lucky. And by the way, is, most NFL teams are 8-8 kind of teams. The ones that you think of as kind of good got a little lucky. They were +2 in turnover differential a couple games, and they wind up 10-6. The kind of teams you think aren't so good, they got unlucky in that way. They wound up 6-10. I mean, but those are both basically the same 8-8 teams. But I will admit that those kind of teams, when they have a special quarterback, seem to eke out these kind of games. As I mentioned, the Giants, generally if they have a defense, which the Lions don't really have, but their bend but not break defense allowed them to keep the score low. And when the score is low, there are more possibilities at the end of the game because one score can win it, which is what the Lions did to the Vikings. If you look at their point differential, Stephen A., they're 7-4 in 11 games. They're +9 on the season. They're winning games by, their average point differential per game is less than 1 point. That's essentially a 500 team with a good quarterback. That's gotten a little lucky. Let me tell you some teams that are ahead of them in point differential. The Ravens are +12. It's 1 point better, but they're 5-5. The Cardinals, Arizona, you don't think of as having a good season. They're not because it doesn't show up in the wins and losses. They're +36 on the year, and yet they're 4-5-1. The Chargers are +14 on the year, 4-6. These are all teams who have outscored the opponents by more than the Lions have, and yet you think of the Lions differently. They deserve credit for the fourth quarter comebacks. Stafford deserves credit. The team deserves credit. Congratulations. But there's a little luck involved here. They're fundamentally not a really good team. They're fundamentally an average NFL team where the balls bounced their way basically a couple times this year. That's what's going on, if we're honest. And by the way, the Giants rode that and a great defense to 2 Super Bowl wins in recent years. So, I mean, I know it when I see it.
Well, if you know it when you see it, then that debunks your whole argument because you brag about the Giants and their 2 Super Bowl championships every chance you get. And not one time have I ever heard you mention the word luck. I'm sure you know it exists, but I never heard you mention it. So let's be clear about
Stephen
that.
A., it was
one.
skill. Don't listen to him. It was skill. That was not luck.
I'm just
And an all-time great clutch quarterback.
Wait. I'm not disputing what you're saying, my brother. What I'm saying to you is that you left luck out when you talk about the Giants, but you're bringing it in here. I'm just saying that your strategy has been exposed. That's all I'm trying to say.
No,
but in 6 of the last 7 games, I understand, but in 6 of the last 7 games, the Detroit Lions have won. And along that way, they've beaten the Eagles, they've beaten the Redskins, and they've beaten Minnesota twice. I can't ignore that.
That's, by the way, that's an outrageous claim that you're making. It's totally different. I bring it up now because it fits my argument now. It doesn't fit my argument when I talk about the Giants.
I understand that. That's what I'm saying.
Max Kellerman, the Giants all skill.
Exactly
Big Blue,
what I'm
baby,
saying.
all day. Let's leave it there. No letdown from the Steelers playing against the luckless Colts. So how much credit is Stephen A. ready to give Pittsburgh after the win? We get into it next.